Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories, here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. My name is Sarah Rodriguez, and I am 34 years old. I've been a park ranger at Olympic National Park for 12 years. This happened during the fall of 2023, when the missing person case of Emma Whitfield turned into something that still haunts me. The radio crackled to life at 4:47 p.m., just as the October sun was beginning its rapid descent behind the towering Douglas firs. I was stationed at the Sol Duque Ranger Station, watching the last of the day hikers filter out from the trails, their faces flushed with satisfaction and autumn chill. Unit 47, we have a missing person report. Female, mid-20s, name Emma Whitfield. Last seen on the Hoh River Trail yesterday around noon. Overdue for checkout by 18 hours. I grabbed my radio, the familiar weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders like a heavy coat. Unit 47, copy. Any additional details on the missing person? Solo hiker, registered for a 3-day backcountry permit. Emergency contact is her sister in Seattle, says Emma never misses check-ins. Vehicle still in the Hoh River parking area. Park Service Vehicle Romeo 7 is en route to your location for joint search. The Hoh River Trail. I knew it intimately. 17 miles of temperate rainforest that could swallow a person whole if they strayed from the marked path. During October, when the light faded by 6 p.m. and the temperature dropped into the 30s, even experienced hikers could find themselves in serious trouble. 20 minutes later, Ranger Michael Williams pulled up in his patrol vehicle, the headlights cutting through the gathering dusk. Mike was a good partner for this kind of work. Methodical, calm under pressure, and he'd been working Olympic longer than I had. His German Shepherd Max rode shotgun, already alert and scanning the tree line. Sarah? Mike nodded as he stepped out, his breath visible in the cooling air. What's our timeline? Emma Whitfield, 26 years old, experienced hiker according to her permit application. She's got overnight gear for 3 days, so she should be prepared for weather. But 18 hours overdue? I shook my head. Could be injury, could be lost, could be weather. Fall storms moved through yesterday evening. Mike attached Max's search harness, the dog immediately focusing on us with those intelligent dark eyes. Or could be something else entirely. That phrase lingered between us as we loaded our gear. Emergency medical supplies, GPS units, high-powered flashlights, emergency blankets, and the search protocol documentation we hoped we wouldn't need for a body recovery. The drive to the Hoh River trailhead took 45 minutes on the winding forest roads. By the time we arrived, the forest had transformed into a cathedral of shadows, the massive Sitka spruces and western hemlocks creating an almost impenetrable canopy overhead. Emma's vehicle, a blue Subaru Outback, sat alone in the parking lot like an abandoned prayer. I ran her license plate through dispatch while Mike examined the car. Vehicle registration matches. No signs of forced entry, no obvious damage. He peered through the windows with his flashlight. Looks like she packed light but smart. Emergency supplies are gone, which means she took them with her. Max was already circling the trailhead, his nose working the scent cone where hundreds of hikers had passed through over the past weeks. But after a few minutes, he locked onto something specific, his body language changing to the focused intensity I'd seen a dozen times before. He's got something, Mike said, and we followed Max onto the trail. The Hoh River Trail in autumn is a place of profound beauty and equally profound isolation. Massive nurse logs, some 6 feet in diameter, lay across the forest floor like sleeping giants, covered in carpets of moss so thick and green, they seemed to glow in the fading light. The river itself murmured constantly just out of sight, a white noise that could mask approaching footsteps, animal sounds, or calls for help. Max led us steadily deeper into the forest, his pace confident for the first 2 miles. The trail was well maintained here, with clear markers every quarter mile and wooden bridges across the smaller creeks. But as we moved deeper into the backcountry, something began to feel wrong. It started with the silence. The Olympic rainforest is never truly quiet. There's always the sound of water dripping from the canopy, small animals moving through the underbrush, the distant cry of ravens. But as we followed Max deeper into the forest, these sounds gradually faded until we walked in an oppressive hush, broken only by our own footsteps and breathing. "Mike," I said quietly, stopping to check my GPS. "Are you hearing this?" He paused, tilting his head. Max had stopped too, his ears pricked forward, but he wasn't moving toward any particular scent trail. "Hearing what?" "Exactly, nothing." We stood there for 30 seconds, straining to hear any sound of wildlife. The absence was so complete, it felt like a physical pressure against my eardrums. Mike keyed his radio. "Dispatch Unit 47. We're approximately 3 miles in on the Ho River Trail. Are there any weather advisories or unusual wildlife reports for this area?" Static answered him. He tried again. More static. "Radio's not working," he said, tapping the device. "Could be the canopy interference. But I'd worked these trails for over a decade, and radio coverage was generally reliable along the main route. I checked my own unit. Same static, though the power indicator showed full battery." Max suddenly whined, a sound I'd never heard from the normally confident working dog. His tail was tucked low and he kept looking over his shoulder as if something was following us. "Let's keep moving," Mike said, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. "If Emma's injured somewhere ahead, she needs us to keep looking." We pressed on, following what appeared to be Emma's trail based on Max's tracking behavior. But as the darkness deepened, our flashlight beams creating moving circles of visibility in an ocean of black, I began to notice things that made my ranger training feel inadequate. The trail markers weren't where they should be. I'd hiked this route dozens of times and I knew the spacing of the wooden posts that marked the official trail. But tonight, they seemed to appear at irregular intervals, sometimes too close together, sometimes so far apart that I worried we'd lost the path entirely. At mile marker 4, except the post read mile 7, we found Emma's first piece of gear. Her water bottle lay beside the trail, not dropped or abandoned, but placed carefully on a flat stone as if it were an offering. The metal surface was completely dry despite the constant mist that dampened everything else in the forest. Mike photographed the bottle's position before bagging it as evidence. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "If she was dehydrated or in trouble, why leave her water behind?" Max approached the bottle cautiously, sniffed it once, then immediately backed away with another whine. When Mike tried to encourage him to continue tracking from that spot, the dog refused to move forward on the trail. "He won't go any further," Mike said, tugging gently on the leash. "Max, come on, boy. Track." But Max planted his feet and stared down the trail ahead of us, not with interest or excitement, but with what looked unmistakably like fear. I checked my watch, 7:30 p.m. We had maybe an hour before we'd need to consider turning back for safety reasons. Standard search protocol dictated that we shouldn't risk becoming victims ourselves. "1 more mile," I said. "If we don't find more sign of her by then, we retreat and call for a full search team in the morning." Mike nodded reluctantly. "Max, stay," he commanded, and the dog immediately sat, obviously relieved to not continue forward. We continued without the dog, our flashlight beams dancing across the forest floor as we looked for any sign of Emma's passage. The trees seemed to press closer on either side of the trail, their massive trunks creating walls that our lights couldn't penetrate. That's when I saw the footprints. Fresh boot prints in a muddy section of trail, clearly from hiking boots, probably a women's size 8 or 9. They were heading in the same direction we were, but something about them made me stop and examine them more closely. "Mike, look at this." He crouched beside me, his flashlight beam joining mine on the prints. The treads were clear and deep, indicating they'd been made recently, probably within the last day. They matched the boot size and style we'd expect from an experienced female hiker. But the stride length was wrong. The distance between steps was too long for a woman of Emma's height. Her sister had said she was about 5 or more. These prints suggested someone with a stride more consistent with a person over 6 feet tall. "Could be she was running," Mike suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. We followed the prints for another quarter mile. They continued at that same impossible stride length, never shortening, never showing signs of the irregular gait that would indicate running or panic. Whoever had made these tracks had been walking with mechanical precision through the forest. The trail began to climb here, winding up a ridge that would eventually lead to one of the backcountry camping areas. According to Emma's permit, she'd planned to spend her second night at 5 Mile Camp, a small clearing with a designated tent site and bear box for food storage. As we climbed, our breathing became labored in the thin mountain air. The temperature was dropping rapidly now, and our flashlight beams caught the glint of frost forming on the ferns and moss beside the trail. That's when we heard the screaming. A woman's voice, high and desperate, echoing through the trees from somewhere ahead and above us. The sound was distorted by the forest, making it impossible to determine the exact direction or distance. "Emma!" Mike shouted, his voice booming through the silence. "Emma Whitfield." The screaming stopped abruptly, cut off as if someone had simply turned off a radio. We waited, listening. Nothing. "Emma?" I called. "If you can hear us, make some noise. We're park rangers." Silence stretched for nearly a minute. Then, from somewhere in the darkness ahead of us, a woman's voice called back, "Help me, I'm hurt. I can't move." The voice was weak, strained with pain, exactly what we'd expect from an injured hiker who'd been lost in the woods for over a day. But something about it raised every alarm bell in my mind. "Keep talking," Mike shouted as we began moving quickly up the trail. "We're coming to you. Where are you hurt?" "My leg," the voice called back. "I fell. I think it's broken. I'm so cold." We scrambled up the steep section of trail, our flashlights sweeping back and forth as we looked for any sign of the injured woman. The voice continued to call out periodically, guiding us forward, always seeming to come from just ahead. But we climbed for nearly 20 minutes without finding her. "This isn't right," I panted, stopping to catch my breath. "That voice has been leading us uphill for 20 minutes, but it always sounds like it's the same distance away." Mike stopped too, his flashlight beam darting nervously between the trees. Maybe the forest is playing tricks with the acoustics. "Help me!" the voice called again, and this time I was sure. It was coming from behind us. We spun around, our lights revealing the trail we'd just climbed. "Empty. I'm down here," the voice called, now clearly coming from below us back the way we'd come. "Please help me." "That's impossible," Mike whispered. "We just came from that direction." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October air. In 12 years of search and rescue work, I'd never encountered anything like this. Injured hikers didn't move around calling for help from different locations. They stayed put and tried to make themselves visible. "We need to get back to Max," I said, my training finally overriding the confusion. "Something is very wrong here." But when we turned to head back down the trail, our flashlight beams revealed something that made my blood freeze. The trail was gone. Where there had been a clear, maintained path just minutes before, now there was only forest. Dense undergrowth, fallen logs, and towering trees extended in every direction our lights could reach. "This can't be happening," Mike said, spinning in a slow circle, his beam searching desperately for any sign of the trail we'd been following. I checked my GPS unit, but the screen showed only static where the topographic map should be. My compass spun wildly, unable to find magnetic north. "Help me, I'm so scared," the voice called again, now coming from directly above us. We both looked up, our flashlight beams piercing the canopy. Something pale moved between the branches about 30 feet overhead, too quick and fluid to be human, but unmistakably the source of the voice. "Please help me. I'm hurt," it called again, and this time I could see that the voice was coming from something crouched on a thick branch, something that might have been human-shaped but moved like no person ever could. Mike's hands were shaking as he drew his service weapon. "What the hell is that thing?" The thing above us shifted position, moving from branch to branch with an unsettling scratching sound. As it moved, it continued to call down to us in that same desperate, injured voice. "Help me. Please don't leave me." "It's not Emma," I whispered, my own hand moving to my radio out of habit, though I knew it wouldn't work. "My leg hurts so bad," the thing called. and now I could see pale limbs that bent in directions that human joints couldn't accommodate. "I've been waiting for you. I knew you'd come for me." "We need to move," I said, grabbing Mike's arm. "Now." We ran. Through the undergrowth, crashing through ferns and stumbling over hidden logs, guided only by our flashlight beams. Behind us, the thing in the trees followed, moving through the canopy with rustling sounds like broken glass being stirred. "Don't leave me," it wailed, and the voice was changing now, becoming something that had never been human. "I'm so lonely, stay with me." I don't know how long we ran through that impossible forest. It could have been minutes or hours. The thing above us continued to follow, sometimes calling down in Emma's voice, sometimes in voices I didn't recognize, sometimes making sounds that weren't words at all but conveyed the same desperate longing. Eventually, we broke through into a small clearing and found ourselves face to face with a tent, a small blue backpacking tent, neatly pitched and properly staked with a pair of hiking boots placed carefully beside the entrance. Beside the tent, a small pile of gear was arranged with military precision. Backpack, sleeping bag, camp stove, food containers. All of it looked exactly like what an experienced hiker would set up for a comfortable night in the backcountry. "Emma?" I called softly. The tent zipper was closed, but there was a faint glow inside as if someone had a flashlight or lantern running. Mike approached the tent with his weapon still drawn. "Emma Whitfield? This is the Park Service. Are you in there?" A quiet rustling came from inside the tent, followed by the sound of the zipper being slowly opened. A woman's face appeared in the opening, pale, dirty, with long brown hair that matched the description we'd been given. She blinked in our flashlight beams like someone waking up from a deep sleep. "Are you park rangers?" she asked, her voice hoarse but unmistakably human. "Yes," I said, relief flooding through me. "Are you Emma Whitfield?" She nodded slowly. "I got lost. I've been waiting for someone to find me." But something was wrong with her eyes. They reflected our flashlight beams like an animal's, glowing with an inner light that shouldn't exist in human pupils. "Emma, we need to get you out of here," Mike said, holstering his weapon but keeping his hand ready. "Can you walk?" She emerged from the tent with movements that were just slightly too fluid, too coordinated for someone who'd been lost in the wilderness for over a day. She was dressed appropriately for the weather, her gear clean and organized, her face showing none of the scratches and exhaustion we'd expect from someone who'd been wandering lost through dense forest. "I'm fine," she said and smiled. The smile was wrong, too wide, showing too many teeth, holding just a beat too long. "How long have you been here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Since yesterday," she said, still smiling. "I set up camp and decided to wait for rescue. I knew someone would come for me eventually." "But you were reported as lost off trail," Mike said. "Your family is worried sick." Her head tilted to one side with a movement that reminded me of a bird studying prey. Was I lost? I don't remember being lost. I remember being exactly where I needed to be. I looked around the clearing. Now that we weren't running in panic, I could see details that made my skin crawl. The trees surrounding us were all dead, their bark stripped away and their branches twisted into unnatural spirals. The ground beneath our feet was carpeted with pine needles, but they were arranged in perfect concentric circles radiating out from Emma's tent. "Emma," I said carefully, "do you remember how you got to this clearing?" She thought for a moment, that unsettling smile never leaving her face. "I followed the voices. They led me here. They told me to wait." "What voices?" "The voices of all the people who've been waiting," she said, and her voice began to change, becoming hollow and echoing. "They've been so lonely. They wanted me to join them. They want you to join them too." The temperature in the clearing dropped suddenly, our breath becoming visible in thick clouds. The glow from Emma's tent intensified, and I realized it wasn't coming from any camping equipment. "We need to leave," I whispered to Mike. "Right now." But when we turned to go, Emma was somehow standing between us and the edge of the clearing. I hadn't seen her move. One moment she was beside her tent. The next she was blocking our path. "Don't go," she said. and now her voice was coming from multiple directions at once. "Stay with us. We've been waiting so long for new friends." Behind her, other figures began emerging from the dead trees. Pale shapes that moved with that same too-fluid motion, all wearing the clothes and gear of hikers, all with that same reflective gleam in their eyes. "How many?" Mike whispered. I counted quickly. 8, 10, more emerging from the shadows with each passing second. All the missing hikers, I realized with growing horror, from all the unsolved cases. They moved closer, surrounding us in a loose circle. Their faces were familiar from missing person photos I'd studied over the years, hikers who'd vanished without a trace, cases that had been closed when no body was ever found. "James Morrison," I whispered, recognizing a man who'd disappeared 3 years ago. "Linda Chen, a woman who'd vanished during a solo hike last spring. They're all here." "We're all here," Emma agreed, her smile stretching impossibly wide. "And now you can be here too. No more searching, no more worry, no more loss." The circle tightened. I could see now that while they looked human from a distance, up close the wrongness was unmistakable. Their movements were too synchronized, like puppets operated by the same hand. Their breathing didn't produce any visible vapor despite the freezing air. And their eyes, those glowing, reflective eyes, never blinked. "What happened to the real Emma?" I asked. "I am the real Emma," she said, and for just a moment something desperate and terrified flickered across her face. "Help me," she whispered, her voice becoming small and human again. "It won't let me go. It's wearing me like clothes." Then the moment passed and the smile returned. Mike had his weapon out again, but we both knew bullets wouldn't help against whatever these things were. "The real Emma is still in there," I said. "They all are. Trapped. Forever," Emma agreed cheerfully, "just like you're going to be." The circle of false hikers began to close in. I could smell them now. Not the scent of unwashed humans who'd been living in the forest, but something else entirely. Damp earth, rotting leaves, the organic decay of things that should be buried. That's when I heard the barking. Max's voice echoed through the forest, strong and determined, getting closer. The false hikers stopped their advance, their heads turning toward the sound with movements sharp and bird-like. "The dog," Emma said, and for the first time, her smile faltered. "It shouldn't be able to find us here." The barking grew louder, accompanied by the sound of something large crashing through the underbrush. The false hikers began to back away from us, retreating toward the dead trees at the edge of the clearing. Max burst into the clearing like a furry missile, his hackles raised, his teeth bared in a snarl I'd never seen from the usually gentle working dog. But he wasn't looking at us. His attention was fixed on the false hikers, and every line of his body screamed aggression and protective fury. Behind him came another figure, a park ranger I didn't recognize, tall and bearded, wearing the uniform but moving with an urgency that suggested he knew exactly what we were dealing with. "This way," he shouted. "Follow the dog. Don't look back." We ran. Max led the way, somehow finding a path through the forest that our eyes couldn't see. The false hikers didn't follow. I could hear them behind us, calling out in pleading voices, begging us to stay, to join them, to end their loneliness. But we kept running, following Max through what felt like miles of impossible forest, until suddenly we burst out onto the familiar Ho River Trail, exactly where we'd left it hours earlier. Max immediately sat and wagged his tail, back to his normal, friendly demeanor as if nothing had happened. The bearded ranger was gone. Mike and I stood there panting, trying to process what had just occurred. Our radios crackled back to life, and dispatch was calling our names with increasing urgency. "Unit 47, respond. You've been off radio for 4 hours. What's your status?" 4 hours. It had felt like 20 minutes. I keyed my radio with shaking hands. "Unit 47, we're okay. Returning to base. We need to report that Emma Whitfield she's not recoverable." "Copy that. Do you need medical support?" I looked at Mike, who was staring back at the forest with the expression of someone who'd seen too much. Negative, but we need to file an incident report, a detailed incident report. The hike back to our vehicles passed in silence. Max trotted beside us, occasionally looking back at the forest but showing no signs of the fear he'd displayed earlier. When we reached the parking lot, Emma's blue Subaru was gone. Her car was here, Mike said, staring at the empty space where it had been parked. We checked the registration. I called dispatch to run the plate number again. According to their records, no vehicle with that registration had been recorded in the park that day. Emma Whitfield, according to the missing person database, had never existed. But when I got home that night and searched online, I found an obituary from 2019. Emma Whitfield, age 22, had died in a car accident 4 years ago. She'd been an avid hiker who'd planned to work for the National Park Service after graduating college. Over the following weeks, I researched the other missing persons cases from Olympic National Park. Every single one of them, going back 20 years, had died elsewhere, in other states, before their supposed disappearance. The things in the forest weren't capturing hikers. They were wearing the faces of people who'd never made it to the park, people who'd died with the regret of adventures never taken, mountains never climbed, trails never hiked. I submitted my incident report, but it was filed away and forgotten. Officially, no missing person case had ever been opened for Emma Whitfield, because no one by that name had ever registered for a backcountry permit. Mike transferred to a different park the following month. He said he needed a change of scenery, somewhere with less forest and more open sky. I stayed at Olympic, but I never take the Hoh River Trail anymore. Sometimes on quiet October evenings when the mist rolls in from the Pacific and the forest grows unusually silent, I can hear them calling from the deep woods. Voices of hikers who never were, begging for company, for someone to join them in their eternal waiting. And sometimes, just sometimes, I'm tempted to answer, because the thing about being a park ranger is that you spend so much time alone in the wilderness, responsible for the safety of people you may never see again. The isolation gets to you after a while. The weight of all those missing persons cases, all those searches that end without answers, all those families who never get closure. The false hikers in the forest understand that loneliness. They offer an end to the searching, an end to the responsibility, an end to the fear that someday you might not be able to save someone who's counting on you. I still do my job. I still respond to missing person calls, still organize search and rescue operations, still patrol the trails and check on visitors. But now I know that some disappearances can't be solved with tracking dogs and GPS coordinates. Some people get lost in ways that have nothing to do with wrong turns or bad weather. And some of the voices calling for help in the forest aren't looking to be rescued. They're looking for company. I've been a park ranger for 13 years now, and I've learned that the most dangerous thing in the wilderness isn't bears or cliff faces or sudden storms. It's the moment when you start to think that maybe being lost forever wouldn't be so bad after all. But I keep my radio charged and my boots laced tight, because somewhere out there might still be real people who need help. Real hikers who took a wrong turn and just need someone to guide them home. And until I can't tell the difference anymore between the real calls for help and the false ones, I'll keep answering them all. Even if it means walking deeper into a forest that grows stranger and more hungry with each passing October night. My name is Sarah Johnson, and I am 34 years old. I've been a park ranger at Great Smoky Mountains National Park for 12 years. This happened during the fall of 2023, when the missing person case of Marcus Chen turned into something that still haunts me. The radio crackled to life at 4:47 p.m., just as the October sun was beginning its rapid descent behind the ridgeline. October in the Smokies meant the tourist season was winding down, but it also meant unpredictable weather, early darkness, and hikers who underestimated how quickly conditions could turn deadly. Ranger Johnson, we have a missing person report at Cataract Falls Trailhead, dispatch announced through the static. 26-year-old male Marcus Chen from Chicago. Last seen this morning around 8 a.m. His girlfriend is at the visitor center now. I keyed my radio while pulling on my heavy jacket. The temperature had dropped 15 degrees since noon, and frost warnings were in effect for tonight. Copy that. ETA 15 minutes. Any details on his planned route? Negative. Girlfriend says he was planning a day hike, somewhere with waterfalls. She stayed at the cabin with a migraine. I grabbed my emergency pack, flashlight, and GPS unit. 12 years of experience had taught me that missing persons in the Smokies during fall were rarely simple cases. The mountains didn't forgive mistakes, and darkness came fast this time of year. The drive to Cataract Falls took me through some of the most remote sections of the park. Ancient hemlocks lined the narrow road, their branches creating a tunnel effect that blocked out what little daylight remained. I'd always loved this stretch during the day, but as shadows lengthened, it felt different. Oppressive, the dying leaves rustled overhead with sounds that seemed almost deliberate, like whispered warnings. At the trailhead, I found Lisa Chen pacing beside a blue Honda Civic. She was a petite woman in her mid-20s, wearing a lightweight sweater completely inadequate for the dropping temperature. Her eyes were red-rimmed, though whether from crying or the migraine she'd mentioned, I couldn't tell. "Miss Chen? I'm Ranger Johnson. Can you tell me exactly what happened this morning?" She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. "Marcus wanted to go hiking. I had this terrible headache, so I stayed at the cabin. He said he'd be back by 4 p.m. at the latest. He's never late, Ranger Johnson. Never." "What was he wearing? Did he have supplies with him?" "Blue jacket, jeans, hiking boots. He had his backpack with water and some granola bars, and his phone, but it's going straight to voicemail." Her voice cracked. "We're supposed to fly home tomorrow." I nodded, making notes. Standard day hiker gear, probably not enough for an overnight if something went wrong. "Did he mention any specific trails or destinations?" "He just said somewhere with waterfalls. He loves photography." She pulled out her phone, showing me a picture of Marcus. Asian American, lean build, friendly smile. The kind of guy who probably underestimated mountain conditions. "This is him." I studied the photo, committing his features to memory. "I'm going to start searching the main trails from this trailhead. I need you to go back to your cabin and stay there in case he returns. Keep your phone on." The Cataract Falls trail system branched into 3 main routes, each leading to different waterfalls. I started with the most popular, a moderate 2.8-mile loop that drew day hikers to the spectacular 80-foot cascade. My boots crunched through fallen leaves as I hiked, calling Marcus's name every few hundred yards. The forest was eerily quiet. Even the usual bird chatter had died down as temperatures dropped. About a mile in, I found the first sign: fresh boot prints in the muddy section near Laurel Creek. Size looked right for a male, tread pattern consistent with hiking boots. But something felt off about the prints. They seemed to wander, as if Marcus had been confused or disoriented. One set led toward the main trail, but another, fainter set headed off into dense undergrowth where no established path existed. I keyed my radio. "Dispatch, I've got tracks approximately 1 mile up Cataract Falls Trail. Subject may have left the established path. Beginning off-trail search." "Copy, Ranger Johnson. Be advised, Weather Service is calling for temperature drop to near freezing tonight. Local PD has been notified." Following the fainter tracks, I pushed through rhododendron thickets and around massive fallen trees. The going was slow and treacherous. These weren't normal hiking conditions. Marcus would have to be seriously lost or injured to come this way. The tracks led steadily uphill, deeper into the wilderness area where few hikers ventured. As darkness settled over the mountains, I switched on my high-powered flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing more boot prints in the soft earth. But now there was something else. Unusual scratch marks on tree trunks, as if something large had clawed the bark. I'd seen bear sign before, but these gouges were different. Longer, more deliberate. The radio crackled. "All units, be advised we have reports of unusual animal activity in Sector 7. Campers at Elkmont report hearing sounds they described as screaming around midnight last night." I paused, listening to the silence around me. Sector 7 was only about 2 miles from my current position. In my 12 years here, I'd encountered plenty of wildlife: black bears, wildcats, even the occasional aggressive wild boar. But the Smokies didn't have anything that screamed loud enough to disturb campers from miles away. The tracks continued uphill, but they were becoming stranger. In some places, the boot prints seemed to be accompanied by something else. longer impressions that looked almost like bare feet, but wrong somehow. Too elongated, with what might have been claw marks at the toe end. "Marcus!" I called out, my voice echoing off the mountainside. Only silence answered. I'd been following the trail for 2 hours when I found Marcus's jacket. It was hanging from a branch about 8 feet off the ground, tattered and stained with something dark. No way it had gotten there naturally. I photographed it with my phone before carefully retrieving it with a telescoping pole from my pack. The fabric was shredded, and the dark stains had a metallic smell that made my stomach turn. But there was no blood on the ground beneath it, no sign of struggle, just those strange elongated prints leading away into deeper darkness. I radioed for backup and a search team, but knew they wouldn't arrive until morning. Protocol said I should return to base and wait. But every hour that passed meant Marcus's chances of survival dropped exponentially. If he was injured and hypothermic, morning might be too late. The prints led to an old logging road that had been abandoned for decades. Weeds and saplings pushed through cracked asphalt, and rusted gateposts marked where vehicles once passed. I'd hiked this area dozens of times but never noticed how the trees seemed to lean inward here, creating an unnatural tunnel effect. My flashlight began to flicker. I tapped it against my palm, and the beam steadied, but the light seemed dimmer somehow. Colder. The temperature was dropping fast. My breath came out in visible puffs, and frost was already forming on the vegetation around me. That's when I heard it. A sound like breathing, but wrong. Too deep, too rhythmic, coming from somewhere ahead on the old road. I called Marcus's name again, but the breathing stopped abruptly, leaving only the whisper of wind through dying leaves. I followed the road for another quarter-mile before finding Marcus's backpack. Like the jacket, it was positioned deliberately, sitting upright against a mile marker post as if someone had carefully placed it there. The contents were scattered around it: water bottles, granola bars, his wallet, and keys. His phone was there too, screen cracked but still functional. I checked the phone's GPS history. According to the tracking data, Marcus had indeed started on the Cataract Falls Trail at 8:23 a.m. But then the GPS showed something impossible. At 11:47 a.m., his location had jumped instantaneously from the main trail to this spot, 3 miles away through terrain that would take hours to traverse. And then, at 12:15 p.m., the GPS showed him moving at impossible speeds, covering ground faster than any human could travel, even in a vehicle. The last location ping was at 2:33 p.m., from somewhere deeper in the wilderness area where no roads existed. A branch snapped behind me. I spun around, flashlight beam sweeping the darkness, but saw nothing. The forest felt different now, watchful, hostile. Every shadow seemed to move just outside the edge of my vision. "Marcus, if you can hear me, I'm here to help." My voice sounded small and thin in the vast darkness. Something answered. Not Marcus's voice, something else. A sound that might have been human once but had been stretched and distorted until it barely resembled speech. It came from multiple directions at once, echoing off the mountains in a way that made my skin crawl. "Sarah." It knew my name. My hand instinctively went to the bear spray on my belt, though I doubted it would help against whatever was out there. Every instinct screamed at me to retreat, but Marcus was still missing. Somewhere in this darkness, a man was counting on me to find him. I forced myself to continue forward, following the old road as it curved deeper into the wilderness. The GPS on my radio showed I was approaching the edge of our detailed maps, territory that hadn't been surveyed since the 1970s. Few people ventured this far from established trails. The road ended at what had once been a logging camp. Rusted equipment emerged from the undergrowth like metal bones. A crane with its arm raised toward the sky. Collapsed trailer foundations. Machinery so old it had become part of the landscape. In the center of the clearing stood a single building, a supervisor's cabin that had somehow survived decades of weather and neglect. Light flickered in the cabin's windows. I approached cautiously, noting that the strange footprints led directly to the front door. Normal procedure would be to radio for backup, but my radio had been producing only static for the past 20 minutes. I was on my own. The cabin door stood slightly ajar. Warm air drifted out, carrying a smell that made me gag, something like spoiled meat mixed with burning hair. But there was also the familiar scent of a campfire, suggesting human presence. "Marcus? Are you in there?" Yes, the voice that answered was definitely human, definitely male, but it was flat, emotionless, like someone reading from a script. "Come in, Sarah." I drew my flashlight and pushed the door open. Marcus Chen sat in a wooden chair in the center of the room, perfectly upright, hands folded in his lap. He wore only jeans and hiking boots. His chest was bare and unnaturally pale in the lamplight. He looked directly at me with eyes that reflected my flashlight beam like an animal's. "Marcus, thank God. Your girlfriend Lisa is worried sick. Are you hurt?" He tilted his head at an angle no human neck should manage. "I'm perfect now." The wrong voice. The same vocal cords, but the intonation, the rhythm of speech. Everything was off, like someone wearing Marcus's voice like a mask. "We need to get you out of here. You're hypothermic, probably in shock. Can you stand?" Marcus stood smoothly, too smoothly. No wincing, no stiffness from hours in the cold. When he stepped into my flashlight beam, I saw that his skin wasn't just pale. It was gray, with dark veins visible beneath the surface like frost patterns on a window. "Sarah," he said in that wrong voice, "do you know what happens to lost hikers in these mountains?" I backed toward the door, hand moving to my radio despite knowing it wouldn't work. "Marcus, you're not well. We need to get you medical attention." "I found something in the woods, Sarah. Something that's been waiting a very long time. It was hungry." Marcus smiled, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too numerous. "It showed me things. About the park. About all the people who've gone missing over the years." The cabin suddenly felt much colder. My breath misted in the air and frost began forming on the windows despite the warmth I'd felt moments before. 47 people since 1976, Marcus continued, taking a step closer. Hikers who walked off established trails and never came back. But they didn't really disappear, Sarah. They just changed. Behind Marcus, something moved in the shadows at the back of the cabin. Something large and wrong that made scratching sounds as it shifted position. "The old stories the Cherokee told about these mountains," Marcus said, his voice becoming even less human with each word. "They called it the Wendigo, the hunger that walks like a man, but they were wrong about one thing." Another step closer. His skin was now so pale I could see his skull beneath it. "It doesn't just hunger for flesh. It hungers for life itself, for warmth, for everything that makes someone human." His smile widened impossibly. "And when it's done feeding, what's left looks just like the original, acts just like them, talks just like them." I fumbled for my bear spray, but Marcus moved faster than anything human could move. In one fluid motion, he crossed the distance between us and knocked the canister from my hand. His grip on my wrist was ice cold and strong enough to crack bone. "Until you look closely," he whispered, his breath reeking of decay. "Until you notice that the eyes don't blink quite right, that the voice is just a little off, that they know things they shouldn't know." From the shadows behind him came a sound like wind through cave openings. But I knew it was breathing. Something massive was back there, watching, waiting. "Lisa thinks I'm still in the woods, doesn't she?" Marcus asked. "She's probably making coffee right now, expecting her boyfriend to come home cold and tired and ready to cuddle by the fire." I tried to pull free, but his grip tightened. My wrist felt like it was being crushed in a vice made of ice. "What are you?" I managed to ask. "I'm Marcus Chen from Chicago," he said in a perfect imitation of his normal voice. "I love photography and hiking, and my girlfriend Lisa. I work in accounting and drive a Honda Civic and take my coffee with too much sugar." The voice changed again, becoming something else entirely. "But I've been walking these mountains for centuries, Sarah. Feeding, growing stronger. And now I have so many faces to choose from." The thing in the shadows moved closer, and I caught a glimpse of it in my peripheral vision. Pale, elongated limbs. A torso stretched like taffy, a face that might once have been human but had been twisted into something unspeakably alien. Its mouth was full of teeth, row after row of them, like a shark's. "The real Marcus is still here," not Marcus said, tapping his temple. "I can access his memories, his mannerisms, his love for Lisa. She'll never know the difference, not until it's too late." I had one chance. While not Marcus was talking, I'd been slowly working my hand toward the emergency flare in my belt. Park rangers carried them for signaling in remote areas, but the magnesium burn was also hot enough to cause serious injury. I pulled the flare and triggered it in one motion, filling the cabin with brilliant red light. Not Marcus shrieked and stumbled backward, hands covering his eyes. The thing in the shadows made a sound like a dying elk and retreated deeper into the cabin. I ran. Behind me, the screaming continued, but now it was coming from multiple voices, overlapping and echoing. How many people had this thing consumed over the years? How many missing hikers were still trapped somewhere inside it? I sprinted through the forest, crashing through undergrowth and leaping over fallen logs. My flashlight beam swung wildly as I ran, illuminating brief snapshots of the terrain. Behind me, something was following. Not running, flowing, moving through the trees like liquid shadow. My radio crackled to life suddenly, making me stumble. "Ranger Johnson, please respond. We have search teams mobilizing. What's your status?" I keyed the radio while still running. "Dispatch, I found Marcus Chen. I paused, gasping for breath. How could I explain what I'd seen? "He's been injured, possibly by wildlife. I need immediate medical evacuation and law enforcement backup." "Copy that. Can you reach the Cataract Falls trailhead for extraction?" "Negative. I'm approximately 4 miles northeast of Trailhead, in the old logging area. And dispatch..." I looked back over my shoulder. Nothing visible in the darkness, but I could feel something watching. "Whatever's out here, it's not a normal animal. Warn the search teams to exercise extreme caution." I made it back to the abandoned road and tried to orient myself. The flare had bought me time, but not much. I could hear movement in the forest around me. Not just one thing now, but multiple sources. Branches breaking, leaves rustling. The sound of something large moving parallel to my path. That's when I realized the horrible truth. The Wendigo hadn't just consumed Marcus. Over the decades, it had taken dozens of people, and now they were all out there in the darkness, wearing the faces of the missing, hunting me. I heard Lisa's voice calling from the forest. "Marcus? Sarah? Where are you?" But Lisa was supposed to be at the cabin, miles away, and her voice was coming from 3 different directions at once. Then I heard my own voice echoing through the trees. "I found him. He's over here." The thing was using my voice to call in search teams, using me as bait. I ran harder, following the old road back toward civilization. But the voices followed me, multiplying. Dozens of people calling for help, using the voices of the missing to lure others into the darkness. The Wendigo's collection of faces, all speaking at once. A search helicopter passed overhead, its spotlight sweeping the forest canopy. I broke every protocol by firing my backup flare directly upward, ignoring the fire risk. The magnesium burst lit up the sky like a tiny sun. The helicopter immediately changed course, vectoring toward my position. But as it approached, I heard something that chilled me to the bone. The voices in the forest began coordinating, calling out as if they were injured hikers signaling for rescue. "Down here! Help us! We're trapped!" The helicopter crew would hear dozens of people calling for help and would try to rescue them all. They had no idea they were flying into a trap. I keyed my radio frantically. "Air support. This is Ranger Johnson. Do not land. Repeat. Do not land. Multiple hostiles on ground. Extract me only, and evacuate immediately." The pilot's voice crackled back. "Ranger Johnson, we're reading multiple heat signatures down there. Looks like survivors." Heat signatures. The thing was warm-blooded or generating heat somehow. To thermal imaging, it would look like a group of lost hikers. "Negative. Those are not human heat signatures. Extract me only." The helicopter hovered overhead while the pilot made a decision. Finally, a rescue harness descended through the canopy. I clipped in and was lifted up through the trees, leaving the chorus of false voices behind. As we flew toward the ranger station, I looked down at the forest. In the helicopter's spotlight, I could see figures moving among the trees. They looked human from this distance, people in hiking clothes waving up at us as if asking for help. But I knew better. The official report listed Marcus Chen as missing, presumed dead due to exposure. Lisa returned to Chicago devastated, carrying photos of a boyfriend who would never come home. The search teams found his scattered belongings but no trace of his body. I requested a transfer 2 days later, but sometimes late at night I get calls on my personal phone. The caller ID shows Marcus Chen's number, and when I answer, I hear his voice asking why I left him in the woods, asking why I didn't save him. The thing is still out there, still wearing his face, still learning how to be human. And I wonder how many others there are scattered across the country. People who went missing in remote areas and came back different, who returned to their families with the right memories and the right mannerisms, but with something hungry and ancient looking out through their eyes. Sometimes I think about calling Lisa, warning her. But what would I say? That her boyfriend might come home someday looking exactly like himself, but wrong in ways she'll only notice when it's too late. Last week, I saw a news report about a missing hiker in Yellowstone. The description matched Marcus perfectly. Same age, same appearance, same story about being separated from his girlfriend during a day hike. The Wendigo is spreading, using the faces it's collected to hunt in new territory. And somewhere in Chicago, Lisa Chen is probably still hoping that Marcus will call her, still keeping his photo on her nightstand, not knowing that if he ever does come home, the thing behind his eyes will be counting the days until she's hungry enough to feed again. I've started carrying 2 flares now instead of 1. And I never work missing person cases anymore. Because I know that sometimes, when someone goes missing in the deep woods, they don't really disappear. They just become something else. Something that knows how to wear their face, speak with their voice, and fool everyone who loved them. Something that's always hungry for more. My name is Sarah Rodriguez, and I am 34 years old. I've been a park ranger at Great Smoky Mountains National Park for 8 years. This happened during the fall of 2023, when the missing person case of Emma Collins turned into something that still haunts me. The radio crackled to life at 4:47 p.m., just as the October sun was beginning its rapid descent behind the ancient peaks of the Smokies. I was finishing my patrol of the Cataract Falls Trail when dispatch called my number. Ranger Rodriguez, we have a missing person report. 26-year-old female Emma Collins failed to return from a solo hike on the Chimney Tops Trail. Last seen this morning around 8 a.m. at the trailhead. Over. I keyed my radio, already mentally shifting into search mode. Copy that, dispatch. Description and gear. 5'4", brown hair, blue jacket, black hiking boots, carrying a red day pack. Family is en route to the visitor center. Rangers Mitchell and Thompson are setting up base camp at Chimney Tops parking area. Your team lead on this one. The familiar weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders like the gathering dusk. In 8 years, I'd seen my share of missing hikers. Most turned up cold and scared but alive, having simply lost the trail or misjudged the time. But something about this one felt different. Maybe it was the way the autumn air had turned sharp and bitter in the last hour, or how unusually quiet the forest had become. Even the ever-present rustle of dying leaves seemed muted. I made my way back to my patrol vehicle, radio chatter filling the growing silence. As I drove toward Chimney Tops, I caught glimpses of the forest through my windshield, trees stripped bare except for the occasional stubborn oak clinging to rust-colored leaves that looked like dried blood in the fading light. The temperature was dropping faster than the weather service had predicted, and fog was beginning to creep between the tree trunks like searching fingers. At the trailhead, I found Rangers Gary Mitchell and Brian Thompson setting up our mobile command post. Gary was a 15-year veteran with the kind of steady calm that made him perfect for search and rescue operations. Brian was newer, only 3 years on the job, but he had good instincts and wasn't prone to panic. "What do we know?" I asked, pulling my heavy jacket from the truck. Gary looked up from the topographical map he was studying. Collins is an experienced hiker according to her family. She's done this trail before. Planned to summit chimney tops and be back by 3 p.m. When she didn't show, her sister called it in. Weather conditions when she started? Clear skies, temperature around 45 degrees, perfect hiking weather. Brian consulted his notes. Her car is still here, keys inside, just like she left it. I studied the trail map, noting the elevation changes and the various offshoots and old ranger paths that branched away from the main route. Chimney Tops was a popular but challenging hike, 4 miles round trip with a steep rocky scramble to the summit. In good weather with an experienced hiker, it should have been a routine day hike. Okay, here's what we're going to do, I said, taking charge. Gary, you take the main trail up to the summit. Look for any signs she made it that far. Brian, you'll work the lower trail, checking all the side paths and creek crossings. I'll take the old ranger trail that parallels the main route. Sometimes lost hikers end up there thinking they're still on the right path. We synchronized our radios and established check-in times every 30 minutes. As the other rangers headed out, I tested my equipment one more time. Flashlight, spare batteries, emergency whistle, first aid kit, rope, emergency shelter. Everything was in order. The old ranger trail was exactly the kind of place where a confused hiker might end up. It had been abandoned years ago when erosion made parts of it unstable, but it was still clearly visible and looked official enough to fool someone who wasn't paying close attention. I'd found 3 lost hikers on this trail over the years. As I hiked deeper into the forest, my radio crackled regularly with updates. Gary reported finding fresh boot prints on the main trail, consistent with the description of Emma's footwear. Brian found nothing on the lower trail and the side paths. Everything seemed routine, textbook even. But something was wrong with the forest. I'd hiked these trails hundreds of times in every season and weather condition. I knew the normal sounds of evening in the Smokies, the rustle of small animals in the underbrush, the distant call of owls beginning their nightly hunt, the creak of trees swaying in the wind. What I was hearing now was different. Wrong. The forest was too quiet, like it was holding its breath. When the wind did blow, it carried sounds that made no sense. Whispers that almost sounded like voices, footsteps that stopped when I stopped, branches breaking in the distance when there was no wildlife to break them. At 6:30 p.m., my radio suddenly cut to static. I tried multiple channels but couldn't raise either Gary or Brian. My GPS unit was acting up too, showing my location as somewhere impossible. According to the screen, I was standing in the middle of Fontana Lake 3 miles away. I stopped hiking and tried to get my bearings the old-fashioned way. The trail I was on looked right, felt right, but something was subtly off. The blazes on the trees were the wrong color, faded red instead of the white I expected, and the distances between them were too far apart, as if the trail was stretching itself. That's when I heard the voice. Help me. It was so faint I almost missed it. A woman's voice, coming from somewhere ahead on the trail. I called out, "Emma? Emma Collins?" No response. But after a moment, the voice came again. "Help me. Please." I quickened my pace, pushing through the growing darkness. My flashlight beam seemed weaker than it should be, barely penetrating the thick shadows between the trees. The temperature was dropping rapidly now, and my breath came out in visible puffs. "Emma, if that's you, keep talking. I'm a park ranger. I'm here to help you." The voice came again, but this time it seemed to be coming from behind me. I spun around, my heart rate spiking. "Emma?" Nothing. The forest was completely silent again, as if even the wind had died. I tried my radio again, still nothing but static. According to my watch, it was 7:15 p.m., well past the time for my scheduled check-in. Gary and Brian would be wondering where I was. Standard protocol would be to return to base if communication was lost. But if Emma was really out here, hurt and calling for help? The voice came a third time, clearer now, and definitely ahead of me on the trail. "Please help me. I'm so cold." I pushed forward, fighting the growing sense that something was fundamentally wrong about this entire situation. The trail should have curved back toward the main path by now, but it seemed to be leading deeper into the forest, into areas I didn't recognize despite years of hiking these mountains. That's when I saw the light. A faint red glow was visible through the trees, maybe 50 yards ahead. Not the white beam of a flashlight or the warm orange of a campfire. This was different, pulsing, almost organic, like a dying ember that couldn't quite extinguish itself. I approached carefully, every instinct trained through years of law enforcement and search and rescue screaming at me to be cautious. As I got closer, I could see that the light was coming from what looked like a small clearing. And sitting in the middle of that clearing was a figure. It was a woman, roughly the right size to be Emma Collins. She was sitting on what looked like a fallen log, facing away from me. She was wearing a blue jacket and had brown hair, just like the description, but she was sitting perfectly still, unnaturally still like a statue. "Emma," I called softly. "Are you okay?" The figure didn't move or respond. I stepped into the clearing, my flashlight beam joining the strange red glow to illuminate the scene. That's when I noticed the smell, something like copper and decay, mixed with an organic sweetness that made my stomach turn. "Emma, I'm Ranger Rodriguez. Your family sent us to find you." Still no response. I moved around to her side, and that's when I saw her face. It was Emma Collins, I could tell from the photo her family had provided, but something was wrong with her eyes. They were open but completely black, not just the pupils, but the entire eyes, like dark holes in her face. And she wasn't breathing. Her chest wasn't moving at all. I reached for my radio automatically, but before I could key the mic, she turned her head toward me. The movement was too fast, too fluid, like her neck was on a swivel. When she smiled, I saw that her teeth were too sharp, too numerous, filling her mouth like the inside of a lamprey. "Thank you for coming," she said in a voice that was Emma's, but also something else. Something that spoke with the sound of wind through dead leaves and the creak of old wood. "I've been waiting for you." I stumbled backward, my hand going to the pepper spray on my belt, though some primitive part of my brain knew it would be useless. This wasn't Emma Collins. This was something else wearing her shape, her clothes, her face. "Where is Emma?" I managed to ask, my voice steadier than I felt. The thing that looked like Emma tilted its head, studying me with those terrible black eyes. "She's here. She's always been here. Just like you'll be here soon." That's when I noticed the others. They were standing at the edge of the clearing, just beyond the reach of the red light. At first, they looked like more missing hikers, men and women in hiking gear, standing quietly among the trees. But as my eyes adjusted, I could see they all had the same wrong stillness, the same black eyes, the same too sharp smiles. I counted at least a dozen of them, maybe more. How many people had gone missing in these mountains over the years? How many had ended up like this? "Who are you?" I whispered. The Emma thing stood up with that same unnatural fluidity. "We are the forest. We are the hunger. We are what remains when the warmth leaves and the light fails." I was backing away now, my hand finding the grip of my sidearm, though I doubted bullets would help. The ring of figures was moving closer, and I realized they were trying to surround me. "Radio dispatch," I muttered to myself, trying to think like a ranger instead of a terrified human. Standard protocol for supernatural encounters. The thought was absurd, but it was all I had to hold on to. I turned and ran. Behind me I heard laughter that sounded like branches breaking and leaves rustling. But underneath it was another sound. Emma's real voice, faint and terrified, screaming for help. She was still in there somewhere, trapped inside whatever that thing was. I crashed through the forest, no longer following any trail. My flashlight beam bounced wildly as I stumbled over roots and dodged between trees. The sounds behind me were getting closer. Not footsteps, but something like the whisper of wind through grass, as if the things pursuing me didn't quite touch the ground. That's when my radio crackled back to life. "Sarah? Sarah, come in. Where the hell are you?" It was Gary's voice, beautiful and normal and real. I keyed my mic while still running. "Gary, I found her, but she's not." I stumbled over a fallen log and went down hard, scraping my hands on the rocky ground. "Sarah, your GPS is showing you 3 miles east of your last position. That's impossible. Are you injured? I looked around, trying to get my bearings. The red light was gone. The pursuing sounds had stopped. I was sitting on a normal trail in a normal forest, with normal darkness gathering under normal trees. According to my GPS, which was working perfectly now, I was exactly where I should be on the old ranger trail. I'm okay, I said into the radio, though I wasn't sure that was true. I need backup at my current position, and we need to expand the search. Emma Collins is... I paused, trying to figure out how to explain what I'd seen. She's in distress. 20 minutes later, Gary and Brian found me sitting on a stump beside the trail, shaking from more than just the cold. They had news. A hiker on the main trail had reported hearing a woman calling for help somewhere in the area where I'd been searching. We organized a full night search with additional rangers and volunteer SR teams. At 2:30 a.m. we found Emma Collins. She was sitting on a fallen log in a small clearing, approximately 50 yards from where I'd been when my radio cut out. She was alive, uninjured, and responsive. Her eyes were normal brown, not black. Her teeth were normal human teeth. She was cold and disoriented, but otherwise fine. But she couldn't remember anything about the previous 10 hours. I was hiking to the summit, she told us as we wrapped her in emergency blankets and checked her vital signs. I remember starting up the rocky part, and then you were here. She had no memory of getting lost, calling for help, or spending the entire day and evening in the forest. According to her, no time had passed at all. When we told her it was almost 3 a.m., she insisted we were wrong. Her family was relieved and grateful. The local news reported another successful search and rescue operation by Great Smoky Mountains Park Rangers. Emma Collins went home to her normal life with nothing more than a good story about getting turned around in the woods. But I knew better. 3 weeks later, I was working a desk shift when a call came in about another missing hiker. A solo female on the Chimney Tops Trail, brown hair, blue jacket. She'd been missing for 6 hours. I drove to the trailhead with my heart pounding, half expecting to find Emma Collins' car again. But it belonged to someone else. Jennifer Martinez, age 29, from Atlanta. Another experienced hiker who'd simply vanished. We found Jennifer 8 hours later, sitting on a fallen log in the same clearing where we'd found Emma. She was alive, uninjured, and couldn't remember anything about the previous day and a half. Her eyes were normal brown. Her teeth were normal, but when she smiled at us in relief just for a moment, I swear I saw something else looking out from behind her eyes. After that, I started keeping track. Over the next 6 months, we had 12 missing hiker cases on the Chimney Tops Trail, all of them solo females between the ages of 20 and 35. All of them found in the same general area, sitting quietly and unable to remember their time in the forest. All of them physically unharmed, but somehow different. I noticed other things too. The hiking groups that would stop talking when these returned hikers passed by on the trail, as if some primitive instinct warned them to be cautious. The way search dogs would refuse to track their scent after they were found, whimpering and backing away. The fact that none of them ever came back to hike in the Smokies again. And late at night, when I was working alone in the ranger station, I would sometimes hear the radio crackle with voices that sounded almost familiar. Women calling for help in voices that were Emma's and Jennifer's and all the others, but not quite right. Always asking for help. Always so cold. I requested a transfer 6 months after the Emma Collins case. Officially, it was for career advancement opportunities at Yellowstone. Unofficially, I couldn't stand another day of finding hikers who weren't quite the same people who had gone missing. My last week in the Smokies, I hiked the old ranger trail one final time. I wanted to see if I could find that clearing again, to see if I could make sense of what had happened that night. I never found it. The trail was exactly as it should be, well marked, properly maintained, leading exactly where it was supposed to lead. But as I was heading back, just as the sun was setting and the October air was turning sharp and bitter, I heard a voice calling from somewhere in the forest. "Help me," it said in Emma Collins' voice. "I'm so cold." And then a moment later, the same voice but different. "Help me, please." And then again, "Help me. I can't find my way back." A dozen voices, maybe more, all calling from different directions in the gathering darkness. All the women we'd found sitting quietly on that fallen log, unable to remember. All of them still out there, still lost, still calling for help that would never come. I walked back to my truck and didn't look back. Now I work in Yellowstone, where the mountains are different and the forests feel clean and normal. I still lead search and rescue operations, and I'm good at my job. But I never work solo anymore, and I never search after dark if I can help it. Sometimes, late at night when I'm lying in bed, I still hear Emma's voice calling for help. And sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed in that clearing, if I'd listened when the thing wearing her face said I'd be there soon. But mostly I try not to think about the fact that somewhere in the Great Smoky Mountains, there are women who look perfectly normal sitting quietly in places the regular search teams will never find. Women who are still calling for help in voices that sound almost right but not quite. Women who are waiting for the next solo hiker to wander off the main trail and hear their voices in the dark. I never filed an official report about what I really saw that night. How could I? But I did add a note to Emma Collins's case file buried deep in the administrative details where most people would never see it, just in case some future ranger needed to know. Subject found unharmed, but exhibiting signs of temporal displacement and selective amnesia. Recommend increased patrols in Sector 7G during autumn months. Advise caution when responding to calls for help from unverified sources after dark. It's not much, but it's something. A warning for whoever comes after me. Because I know Emma Collins is still out there and she's still calling for help. And someday, another ranger is going to hear her voice in the darkness and follow it into the forest. I just hope they're smarter than I was. I hope they remember that not everyone who calls for help can actually be helped. And I hope they remember that sometimes, the best thing you can do for a missing person is to let them stay missing.